ninth chapter of the book of Nechemiah of Yomi Esrim Va'arba L'Chodesh Hazer. It was the 7th month, the month of Tishrei. We talked about Rosh Hashanah and the verses that are listed there of the Jews being scared or upset about what it says in the Torah. And we continue, it's later in the 7th month. It's after Sukkot, which we talked about the celebrating Sukkot at length yesterday. And so now it's the 24th day of the month of what we call Tishrei. The Israelites assembled with fasting, with sackcloth, and with earth upon them. Again, coming back all the way from the last chapter to Rosh Hashanah, where the Torah was read to them by Ezra, and what it said they had not been listened to. And those of the stock of the Yichus of Israel separated themselves from all the foreigners and stood and confessed their sins and the iniquities of their fathers. Sounds like even though they had promised 10 and 15 years earlier to separate from their non-Jewish wives, that they hadn't necessarily done that, or only some of them had done it because it's a decade later, or they brought them back. And now they're going to do it again. So they stood in their places and they read from scroll of the Torah for a fourth of the day, we'll say for 3 hours, and for another fourth day, another 3 hours, they confessed, they prayed before God. Vayakam al ma'alah halaviyim Yeshua v'nei Kadmiel Shivanya Buni Sheravia b'nei Chanani Vayizaku b'kol gadol Adonai Elohim. On the platform of the Levites stood Yeshua and Badni and Kadmiel and Shavnia and Buni and all these, and they cried out to God. Vayamru halaviyim Yeshua v'Kadmiel v'nei Chashvanya Sheravia Hodia Shavanya Patachia Kumu Baruchu et Adonai Elohechem min olam ad olam v'varchu shem kvodecha u'meromam al kol brachot tila. So these Levites, ones we just mentioned, they said to the people, rise and praise God, right? Min olam v'ad olam, from this world to all worlds, right? For all eternity. May God's name be glorious, be respected, with every blessing and every praise. Atahu Adonai levadecha, Ata asita et hashamayim shmei hashamayim v'chol tzvam haaretz v'chol asher aleh yamim v'chol asher bahem v'ata mechayet kulam utzva hashamayim lecha mishtachavim. Verse that we know from that's parts of it said regular. You alone are God. You're the heavens, the highest of the high, the earth, everything upon it. You made them all, and we should all bow down, and everything prostrates, everything bows down before you. You are the one who took Avram from the fire, the Ur of the Chaldeans of the Kasdim, and you made him Avraham. And of course, the Chaldeans are also known as the Babylonians. So the idea of them saying you took Avraham from Ur Kasdim is also related to them who have come back from the land of the Kasdim, from Babylon, after being relegated there, exiled there, at this point about 140 years earlier by Nebuchadnezzar. We know these verses. And you found Abraham's heart to be true, and you made a covenant with him to give him this land, lists all the nations, to give it to his descendants. You kept your word because you are righteous. Now they skip ahead. Historically, you saw the affliction of our ancestors in Egypt, and you heard their cries at the Sea of Reeds. You perform signs and wonders against Pharaoh, against all of his servants, all the people of the land, because you knew that they acted presumptuously toward them. You made a name for yourself that endures to this day. V'hayam bakata lifnehem, v'yavru b'toch hayam b'yabashav v'rafem yishlachtum solo k'mo even b'mayim azim. You split the sea before them. The Bnei Yisrael passed through the sea on dry land, but you threw those who pursued them, those who chased them, like stones into the depths, into the raging water. And I heard one time, we call it Kriyat Yam Suf, which it's from Kuf Reish Ayin, which means to cut in Hebrew. And I heard one time that until about the 16th century or so, it was called Bikiyat Yam Suf. We don't see this idea of Kriyat Yam Suf until later. Somebody once told me it's first in the commentary of the Al-Shich, a commentary who lived in the late 16th century in in Sfat, if I'm correct, with many of the great Kabbalistic leaders. Here we're great. Vayam bakata lifnehem. You made it into a valley. Continuing in verse 12, Vamud Anan, right? All that we know, those verses, of course, from davening towards the end of the Psuke de Zimra and Shachris before we say Az Yashir. Uvamud Anan, Hin Chitam Yomam Uvamud Eshlaila Ir Lahem Et Haderech Asher Yelchuvan. You gave them pillar of cloud during the day to protect them from the sun, and night a pillar of fire, so there would be light and they would know where to go. Val Har Sinai Yeradata V'Daber Alehem Mishamayim V'Tein Lehem Mishpatim Yisharim V'Torot V'Emet Chukim Mitzvot Tovim. You came down into Har Sinai and spoke to them, gave them rights and rules and teachings, good laws and commandments. V'Shabbat Kodshecha Odata Lehem Mitzvot Chukim V'Torah Tzivita Lehem B'Yad Moshe Avdecha. And you made known to them your holy Sabbath and your laws and your commandments through Moshe Avdecha, your servant. We're in verse 15. Pasuk Tevav Lechem Mishamayim Natata Lehem L'Ra'ava Mumayim Miselo Tzeta Lehem L'Tzamam V'Tomer Lehem, excuse me, Lavo L'Reshet Aretz Asher Nasata Et Yadcha Latet Lehem. You gave them bread from the heaven. They were hungry, and water from rocks when they were thirsty. And you told them to go and conquer the land that you swore to give them. V'heim Va'avotenu Hizidu V'Yikshu Et Arpam V'Lo Shamu Et Mitzvoteva. But they, our ancestors, they acted badly, and their stiff necks and their stubbornness, they didn't obey you, they didn't listen to your commands. We're in verse 17. Pasuk Yud Zayin Vayimanu Lishma V'Lo Zachu Niflotecha Asher Asita Imahem V'Yikshu Et Arpam V'Yinu Rosh L'Shuv La'avudatam B'Mir Yam V'Yata Eloas Lichot Chanun V'Rachum Erech Apayim V'Rav Chesed V'Lo Azavtam. And they didn't obey you. They didn't pay attention to the wonders, to the miracles that you did to them. They stiffened their necks in their defiance, and they wanted to return to slavery. Right? We have this word here, Miriam. It's like the name Miriam. Miriam sounds like Maryam, the bitter waters, the waters of the Nile River the Jewish babies were thrown into. But they wanted to go back to their slavery, to their bitterness. But you, God, were, and right, we have a use of some of the Yud Gimel Midot Rachamim, 13 attributes of mercy of God: slow to anger, merciful, full of kindness, and you did not leave them. Even though they made themselves a molten calf and said, "This is your God who brought you out of Egypt," committing great sins, against you. But you did not abandon them in the desert, and you left the clouds of glory, you left the fire at night, pillar of fire, so that they would be able to go. And you endowed them with your good spirit to instruct them. You did not withhold your manna from their mouths. You gave them water again when they were thirsty. Varbim shana kilkaltam bamidbar lo chaseru salmotehem lo valu v'raglehem lo vatseku. 40 years you sustained them in the wilderness. They lack nothing. Their clothes did not wear out. Their feet did not swell. Right? All of what they wanted to have, they have. And this is straight from a pasuk in Dvarim, Simlatchalo Valtam Elech V'Raglchalo Vatsekazeh Arbaim Shana. It's working straight off a pasuk from Dvarim. Vatitein Lem. We're in verse 22, pasuk Chav Bet. Mamlachot va'amamim v'telchalkein lefe'ah. Yershu et Eretz Sichon v'et Eretz Melech Heshbon v'et Eretz Og Melech HaBashan. You gave them the kingdoms of the peoples, a lot of them territory. They took possession of the land of Sichon, king of Heshbon, and of Og, king of Bashan. Right, so we're still on the eastern bank of the Jordan River. Uvneihem hirbita kochvei hashamayim v'tivieim ela aretz asher amart lavotem lavo lareshet. And you brought many children, as numerous as the stars of the sky, and you brought them into the land which you had promised to their fathers that they would gain it, that they would possess it. We're in verse 22, pasuk Chavdal vayavohu habanim v'ershu et haaretz v'tichna lefneim et yoshvei eretz haknanim. So the children of these people who spent 40 years in the desert, they came, they took possession of the land. You subdued the Canaanites before them. You delivered them into their right. The Jewish people, they defeated their kings, their land as you pleased. Arim b'tzurot v'adamash meina v'yershu batim leim koltuf barot chatzuvim kramim v'zeitim v'eitz ma'achal l'rov v'echlu v'yispeu v'yash. Vayashminu vayitadnu b'tuvcha hagadol. They captured the fortified cities, the rich lands. They took possessions of the houses, every good, the cisterns, the vineyards, the olive tree, the fruit trees. They ate, they were filled, they grew fat, they grew luxuriated in your great bounty, right? You did all these things for them, God, and what did they do? They possessed all these wonderful places, and they had great lifestyle. And then in verse 26, Vayamru, Vayimrodu Bach, Vayashlichu et Toratcha, Charei Gavam, V'et Neviecha Haragu, Asher Eidu Bam LaShiva Melecha, V'asu Ne'atzot Gedolot. They rebelled, they defied, they went against your teaching, they killed your prophets who admonished them. They committed great impieties. Vatitnam biad tzarehem, vayatzeru lahem, uveitzaratam yitzaku elech, vatam yishamayim tishma, v'rachmecha rabim titein lem moshiim, v'yoshem miad tzarehem. They didn't listen to you, and you delivered them into the power of their enemies, who oppressed them. And then all of a sudden, they're in the foxhole, and there's no atheists. They cried out to you in the heavens, and you, in your compassion, gave them saviors who saved them. And we know this we saw a long, long time ago. It's the cycle of the book of Shoftim, where Bnei Israel sin, and then they get attacked by an enemy, and then God sends them a messenger, and they have a time of peace, and after that time of peace, then they sin again, etc., etc. And you did this over and over again. And it says right, and this is what we're told then in 28, the description further of the cycle. But when they had relief and everything was fine and they had peace, what did they do? They sinned against you. They abandoned you. And so again, an enemy was able to attack them. They cried out to you over and over again. It happened. Vatad bahem lashivam el toratecha vehema hizidu v'lo sham'u l'mitzvotecha u'mishvotecha chatuvam asher yaseh adam v'chaya bahem. Right? Nu chateif soreret varpam hikshu v'lo shomeo. You admonished them to turn them back to you. You weren't trying to be cruel to them, but they acted presumptuously. They didn't listen to your commands. They sinned against your rules. They did by following which a man shall live, which is, right, of course, we have the words v'chai bahem regarding the mitzvot and the Torah, and they're working off that they are doing things in the way that they want to live, not in a way that is proper in to the God who has done so much for them. And it says here, right, what did they do? Again, they were stubborn and stiff-necked and defined the word sorer, Ben Sorer and Moreh, back in the book of Dvarim, Yirmiyahu and others had inverted that to describe Bnei Israel as being a Ben Sorer Umoreh to God, a rebellious child to God. Vatim Shocher in verse 30, Alehem Shanim Rabot Vatad Bam Baruchacha B'yan V'yech Ezinu. Vatitnam, sorry, Biad Amei Ha'aratzot. You bore with them for many years. You admonished them with your prophets, but they would not give ear. So you delivered them to the power of the peoples of the land. So even though we were dispersed, we were sent out into exile, we were delivered to the hands of our enemies. Again, your mercy, God, you didn't allow us to be destroyed completely. You are a compassionate God. And now God, a great, a mighty, and awesome God, right? We know this. Shmona Esrei, Kel, Gadol, Gibor, Norah. Right? You have remained faithful to the covenant. You did not treat us lightly. All the suffering that has overtaken us from the time of the Assyrian kings until this day. The Assyrian kings, we pointed this out, I believe, a long time ago, when Assyria comes and they exile the 10 tribes, that is the end of the cycle. The cycle is most prominent in the book of Shoftim. We talked about just a few moments ago, but that cycle, in a sense, continues with Bnei Israel sinning and enemy attacking them, and the kings, whether it be the Davidic dynasty, whether it be the northern kingdom, eventually defeats them, and Bnei Israel has a certain amount of peace until Assyria, until Sancheriv comes and exiles the 10 tribes. At that point, this cycle over and over again of God saying, okay, fine, I'll give you another chance, ends. But we're being told here that God, you have, right, from the time of the Assyrian kings to this day, you have still remained with us. Verse we know from liturgy generally. Surely you are in the right with respect that all has come upon us. You have acted faithfully, and we have been wicked. That's what we have. Have been. Right, and we say this regularly. le'edotecha asher ha'idota bahem. Our kings, our officers, our priests, our fathers, they didn't follow your teaching. They didn't listen to your commandments and the warnings that you gave them. Ve'hein b'malchutamu v'tovcha harav asher natata lahem uve'eretz harchava v'hashmeina asher natat levneim lo avducha lo shavu mima'aleihem haraim. And even when they had their own kings and they had the good life and the rich land, and you gave them everything, they didn't serve you. They turned away from you. Hinei anachnu hayom avadim v'aretz asher natat l'avoteinu lechol pirya ve'tuva. Hinei anachnu avadim aleha. We are slaves of the land. Slaves doesn't mean a bad thing here. You gave our fathers to enjoy its fruit and bounty. Here we are slaves upon it. Here the word slaves, I don't like that translation. Where we have the land again. Vatavota marba lemalachim asher natata lehem b'chatutainu v'al gvienu moshlim uvamtenu kirtzonam v'tzara gdola anachnu. On accounts of your sins, it yields its abundant crops to kings whom you have set over us. They rule over our bodies and our beasts as they please, and we are in great distress. And so here, Bnei Israel are complaining to God. Things are not good. But what's interesting, what they do here is they are trying to evoke the historical mercy of God. Historically, you have been merciful to us, even when we have sinned, and now we're ready to do something else. We're not going to sin anymore. We're going to remain close to you. Things have not been simple. We built the walls of Jerusalem. We have made mistakes. And again, this evokes in many ways. It's not Ezra. It was Ezra in his book. This is not Ezra again, although he was the one reading the Torah in the beginning of this month of Rosh Hashanah. There is this great fear of another catastrophe. There is a great fear, if the Jewish people don't listen to God, that just as the first temple was destroyed 150 years earlier, that it will happen again. And so that is really the backdrop to this chapter, verses that we know, Achnun, verses that we know that we say every day that really describes the entirety of Jewish history. A lot of the Jews who returned fairly ignorant of Jewish life, of Jewish history. And so the Leviim here are really trying to stress to them the importance and the significance and the knowledge of who they are, what their background is, and therefore why they need to leave behind the sins and be much more faithful so they will not have a repeat with an imminent or any sort of destruction of the Beit HaMikdash and of Jerusalem, which they just fortified and have rebuilt.